Hey guys, here's an update on the Sparton Jr restoration project. As you can hear, I've got it playing. Still have a little bit left to do, like sealing these electrolytics inside this can, but I wanted to make sure the set was working properly before I finish that off, because once they're inside this can, they'll be really hard to get at in case something's gone wrong. I also replaced a few resistors and capacitors underneath. Cleaned up some of the wiring. I'm going to put new caps on these tubes here. A new wire going into the coils here. The volume control is no longer scratchy since I took it apart and cleaned it up. The radio's got plenty of volume, actually too much volume to start distorting if I turn it up really loud. I think part of that's because I'm in the middle of a large city and not too far from some transmitting towers, so it's getting a little bit overpowered. Some of these old radios had what they call a local DX or local distance switch to actually cut down the gain for local stations. In this case, I'll just turn the volume down. I also put in a bunch of nice globe tubes, mainly from that big box I got recently that I showed you a video of a few weeks ago, including this nice 80 rectifier tube. Before I was using this solid state guy. Well, using a tube has more of a voltage drop across it, so the radio is now operating more in its normal voltage range than with this guy. Speaking of voltage ranges, one nice thing on this radio is that it's got this little fuse box down here. Just the fact that it has fuses is actually kind of unusual because a lot of old radios didn't. But what's extra nice here is that there's 3 positions for the fuse. For 100, 110, and 120 volts. A lot of times these old radios were designed to run on 110, and when you're running on a modern outlet, which is more like 120, 125, it's going to run pretty hot, and the transformer will run really warm because you're putting more voltage through it than it was designed for. But in this case I got it on the 120 setting, and this has been running about 2 hours, and this transformer is barely warm, so that's just great. I didn't really do an alignment on this per se, because this is what they call a tuned radio frequency radio, so there is no local oscillator or mixer or IF transformers really. It's more like a giant bandpass filter with a couple tuned amplifier stages. So say you dial this into AM 720 or 720 kilohertz. What you're really doing when you adjust this big tuning capacitor is you're setting each of these filter cans to allow only 720 kilohertz to go through. And then these just amplify whatever is allowed to go through by the filter. So 1 amplifier, 2 amplifiers, a detector which converts the RF into AF or audio frequency ranges, and then a push-pull output stage. I think I mentioned earlier that this was originally designed to have 183 output tubes. When I got this, both the tubes were gone. I'm sure somebody grabbed them long ago because they're scarce and command a pretty high price on eBay if you can find them at all. Well actually, geez, like 8 months ago now, took a trip to Michigan to pick up some TVs, and I managed to find one of these tubes there, which is a genuine Sparton 183 audio output tube that tests really strong. So to give you some idea, this is how big the original tube was compared to these little 71As. This has, I think, maybe 2.5 times the output power of these little guys. So if I ever find another one, I'll be really curious to pop them in and see how much better this radio sounds. But as it is, it works okay. Keep in mind this radio is about 80 years old, and this TRF is a rather primitive design. So there's no automatic volume control, no automatic frequency lock. So as I move around, or if I touch the antenna, or the wind blows, the volume can drift up and down. I think that's part of the charm though. I'd also mentioned I'd seen a picture of one of these with a really shiny chassis. Well, it turns out that I tried polishing up, cleaning this up a little bit, and it turns out that only some areas got shiny. Probably it was cadmium plated originally, but in some areas, like here, it's worn off. It's really just down to steel, rusty steel. I've cleaned most of the rust off, but it doesn't really polish up all that well, so I'm not going to bother spending too much more time on it. And other parts like this transformer and these coil shields and the tube shields are actually painted with silver paint. So underneath this grime here is the old original silver paint. So I'm just going to leave that alone. Oh, and speaking of shields, I left one of them off so you could see the globe tube underneath. But I am missing one of these. So with the two I do have, I'll shield these two more critical tubes and I'll just leave it off this guy. But if I can ever find a third one somewhere, or something with the right outer diameter and height, I'll certainly pick one up and plop it over that tube. I did run this once without any of these tube shields on, and this thing just went berserk with the feedback and the oscillations and so on. I had to hit the power switch quick before I burned out the speaker. Yeah, so this is just about done. I still need to replace the power cord with that nice vintage, or reproduction rather, cloth power cord. Replace the plate that goes over these fuses. Put this can back over those caps. And I think the chassis is done then. And there's just a little bit of work left to do on the cabinet. Some of the veneer is separating a little bit, and one of the cross bracings inside is missing, so I'm going to cut out a little piece of wood and glue that on to strengthen it up. Put on a coat of wax and go call this done. So probably just one more video in this series.